Today is the fourth session of the summit, and so excited to have everyone here. A very good morning and good afternoon and good evening where you are from. So excited that we could all gather here for this GSDC CLO summit. My name is Setole. For those who don't know, I am the regional manager for GSDC and your moderator for the session. My colleague Imti Renla is also joining me as co-host. So if you require any assistance during the interview, feel free to reach out to her on chat. You can reach out to me as well on chat for any assistance, any queries you have. You can just feel free to reach out there. Today we have a very exciting speaker among us today, but before I go ahead and introduce to him, just want to give a quick thanks to our official media partner, that is our World Press Hub. A very big appreciation from GSDC team to the team of World Press Hub for being our official media partner. For the introduction of our hosting team, that is Global Steel Line Council, we are an independent vendor-neutral international credentialing and certification organization that has had 50,000 learners find credibility in the top emerging and skill-based certifications. So we are proud to be accredited by ANSI, that is American National Standards Institute, and ABICB, that is the Accreditation Board of International Certification Bodies. Our certifications are well curated and designed by our subject matter experts and our advisors who are. Okay, so as I was saying, our certifications are curated by our advisors who are academic affiliates from prestigious universities like Yale, MIT, Stanford, Wharton, and Harvard. We are also proud to be partnered with 50+ global training organizations who are our authorized training partners, and they come from regions, from African regions, European regions, the LATAM, the Middle East, and we are so proud to be a part of them. They are our authorized training partners, and also a special appreciation to our partners who have come forward to be our official supporters for the CLO Summit. Thank you so much. And for those of you being here, thank you for joining, and thank you again for sharing about it into your network. We're so grateful to you all. Not forgetting our volunteer support, individual supporters who came to share about our event on their stories, on their posts. We are so grateful that you could help us and support us. A very big thank you and appreciation from GSDC team to you guys. Here, just a quick intro about the Chief certificate and the L&D certificate by GSDC. These are our accredited certificates by GSDC, which are globally recognized and have a lifetime validity. So if you are interested to go to this part, after the session, if you're interested to learn more about it, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. The link is also shared on the chat box. You can have a look on our website and know more about the details. We would love to. Now, without further ado, allow me to introduce our speaker for today. We have Mr. Aaron Brown. Aaron has spent 15 years of his career as a process improvement professional, working for several tech and MFG companies, including Novo, Philips, Bosch Electronics, eBay, and ClearOne Communications. And he has led L&D, leadership development, talent development, and audit strategy for various companies. And we are so honored to have him here today. Aaron, just before I give you the time, information for the audience that we will have a Q&A session after the presentation for 15 minutes. So request everyone to save your questions until then. And yes, if required, you can definitely use the chat box to interact with our speaker as well. So Ellen, if you are ready, you can take over the screen and the time now.
Great. Well, thank you. I don't know if my screen is still up. Okay, good. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for that warm welcome. It's really exciting for me to be part of a more global CLO. I've done some recent interactions with local CLO exchanges here in the United States, but this is my first time with more of a global audience. So I'm very excited to be part of this, and I appreciate this opportunity to share some ideas with you. I realize that for many of you, you're in all different kinds of time zones. And I hope that I'm not the only thing keeping you from a deep sleep or a nice breakfast or a great dinner, wherever you may be. The purpose of my presentation today is to share what many of you have already been seeing and hearing about the current environment we are all in as a result of the many different factors that have affected the workplace, and workers. Yes, all of these different aspects of our work that has changed in the last few years. What has been shared is an innumerable amount of data from my experience. There's so much data, trends, surveys, industry analysts, and research regarding all different aspects of human resources. And what I want to try to do today is focus on specifically learning and development and what we're seeing from the industry that will help us build a case for people development in our organizations. And I think what I'm seeing, we can build a very compelling case for our different organizations in a way probably like never before. So the flow that I'd like to use is to go through this series of different topics to help me make my case, if you will, today. So starting with the premise, I can't think of, as I reflect over the last few years, I cannot think of a time in our field and our function where the need was greater for learning and development, for higher performance, for more agile workers who can quickly learn and apply skills in new fields and jobs that seem to be popping up every day. It's almost unbelievable to see where we were just 2 short years ago. I remember exactly where I was when COVID really hit, and the rapid changes that changed everything as a result. The ripple effect has changed, I think, things forever in the workplace. I can't remember a longer 2 years in my life. I will honestly admit that I was not prepared as an L&D professional for the changes that took place. We were caught in our organization in a really reactive mode. We were scrambling to adjust to the hybrid, the new remote work, the changes in expectations of workers, and how to deliver existing learning completely differently in some cases, and at the same time with this notion of outdated skills. So you didn't really miss too much. Here's the slide I was on. So just an intro slide. So as a result of all these changes, I think we're just at this precipice. At least I feel this way. It's like we have this opportunity to do things differently. And so one of my premises for today in this presentation, even though I'm going to be sharing a lot of data, it's this opportunity to seize the day. And I think the reflective question that I want all of us to think about and ask ourselves is, are we ready to accept that challenge? I was in a very reactive mode in my organization during the pandemic, and even now in some ways. But how am I viewing this opportunity? Am I leveraging the data from industry and the trends and what we're learning from this to really transform L&D going forward? And I think that's a huge opportunity. So that's what I want you to be thinking about. Some of you might be more ahead. Some of you might be more in a reactive mode. I'm sure we could talk a lot about that and share stories. But that's what I want to do. So let me give you a peek into what, from my view, some of the data that has been interesting to me, that has helped me form a better case for people development going forward. So what I'm going to do is go through a series of industry insights. I'm going to go pretty quickly through these, if that's okay with you, because there's quite a bit here. And I want to not try to drill down in any one particular area. Rather, I want to water ski or skim. I want to skim over several areas because I think it gives us a better 360-degree view of how people are seeing our function and what companies are doing as a result. So let's buckle up and here we go. So this first area is around skills. I don't think I've seen anything anything with more data than around skills, not even just during the pandemic or post-pandemic, but even before the pandemic. Maybe that was your experience as well. I've seen so much around reskilling, upskilling, the need to focus on skills. I think this is a massive focus from my perspective. And most of you are probably in the process of either reacting to or getting ahead of the skills curve. But this particular slide just shows that there is a lot of investment, especially in large organizations that are investing in this area. This is interesting to me because it also shows that CEOs are aware of skills. I can remember a time, maybe not that long ago, 10 years ago, when I'm not sure my CEO was really thinking about skills. I think other things were on his mind. But it's interesting, this graph shows how skills has moved up in terms of the concern for the availability of skills. To me, this is good news because now we don't have to sell skills as much, hopefully, to our organization, but that hopefully your top leaders are aware, as mine is, much more about skills in general. So I think that's important to know, that there is this heightened awareness with our leadership. I think we've all seen data that suggests, yes, skills are important, but we're also, there's gaps. Companies are lagging in terms of their ability to stay ahead of the skills curve. So this effect of not having the right skills at the right time shows that a lot of companies aren't feeling very prepared. And the need is almost pushing us, right? It's pushing us to move faster. And if we aren't able to get ahead of this curve or to solve for skills, the potential for slowing down business as a result is part of the risk. So this becomes a business problem, not just an L&D problem. I think it's just fascinating to see how many companies and organizations really still aren't very prepared to handle the skills gap. And I don't believe there aren't any real simple or straightforward answers for this. I think, at least if you're like me right now, we're struggling to figure out how to stay ahead of that. Which skills are the most important? How do we make sure that we maintain relevancy in our workforce with the speed of business change that's happening? I love this graph from Gartner that shows that this evolution around skills, skill needs. They found that the number of new skills needed in positions today are increasing about 10% year over year. And the skills that employees currently have are expiring and becoming irrelevant at a faster rate. Around 30% of the skills that were present maybe 3, 4, or 5 years ago will not be needed. And at this time, it was talking about 2022. So that's very interesting. So in order to stay relevant as business disruption continues, we need a plan in place to ensure our employees have those skills they need to accomplish future roles. Once again, I don't think that's easy to do or figure out. It's a challenge. This was interesting for me that I learned recently from Gartner is that there are a couple of different strategies to think about how to identify and then apply new skills. This research indicated that those organizations that were trying to be more predictive around skills actually had a harder time applying new skills than even those strategies around just reacting to skills, meaning reacting to the business need for different skills actually was a higher percentage of skills that were learned were applied than predictive models. That kind of surprised me because I was in a situation where I thought I needed to kind of predict what was coming before it came. And what Gartner is suggesting is that we have to have a different model, more of what they call a dynamic response to skills as they arise. This is a much more sophisticated approach, and it's challenging, but it gets better results. They're finding that organizations that can do more of a dynamic approach versus a reactive or just predictive only, 75% of those skills that are learned are actually being applied versus 31% of predictive. So this is a shift in how to sense. They call it collaboratively sensing skills by partnering with others in the organization and not just trying to do it from an L&D perspective only. So there's more there, but I just wanted to tee that up because I think that's an interesting analysis. I think this was interesting as well, this idea of emerging skills even in our own function. There are many studies indicating that, I've seen lots of different lists of different skills. What I liked about this particular sample, is that it suggests that we need to also move. And maybe we need to move out by example, leading out in the organizations in our own functions. In order to stay current with the rapid pace of business change. And as I look at this list of skills, I don't think these are all simple skills that you can learn quickly overnight. Rather, they're more in depth and they take more critical thinking and sophistication. In some ways, I really find this exciting. I love to see this list. To me, it tells me, wow, we need to really shift from some of our traditional skills to these skills. I love the idea of transforming my instructional design team, so my instructional designers, into learning experience consultants, or my trainers into more like data analysts, professionals that can look at data and then quickly take insights and quickly incorporate them into facilitation on the fly. Those are just a couple of examples. I'm sure maybe many of you have done similar things as you've tried to bring in new skills into your L&D functions. The implication for me on this means new job descriptions, new expectations, new responsibilities that we're hiring and selecting differently. And then for those that are on the job, we need a way to upskill in our current roles. But I love this idea of leading out by example so that we can then help assist the organization with their efforts as well. This graph represents kind of this evolution. What we talked about in the last few slides was just the need for skills, and upskilling and reskilling. This now takes it to the next level for me. This now says skills are the new currency. Kelly Palmer from Degreed, I think I coined this phrase. And with the advent of skills being the new currency for the future, I think this gives us an opportunity to build these into more as we think about career development. So this notion of skill trees or skill paths, we can see patterns from analysts suggesting that traditional career paths are too archaic and difficult to maintain because new jobs and roles are being created every day. As an example, I did an analysis a few weeks ago. I explored our own companies. We're a credit union. We have about 3,000 employees. And we have created 20 new roles in the past 2 years. And so I thought that was really interesting because we haven't really been tracking that or paying attention to that metric. But I think it suggests that in those 20 new roles, they aren't replacement roles, they're brand new roles. And so this means that new skills, we need new skills in those roles. So shifting to skills maps and skill trees as a way of thinking about how skills can be tied to career development and progression, not only just to stay current in our jobs. I love that idea. I think it opens up new ways of thinking for us as we think about people development. It's, I don't know what your experience is in your organizations, but I think this notion of more lateral movement, not always just upward mobility, has become much more popular. In our organization, we talk a lot more about the lattice versus the ladder. Horizontal movement, horizontal progression and development. This idea that more people will have multiple roles in an organization, and to be able to be ready to serve in those different roles, they will have to have different skills and be prepared for that. I remember when I worked at Uber before this organization, I had never seen such a fast-paced organization in my life. Literally, at the time, they would create new business units almost every quarter. And I remember asking people in some of our training classes, when we started the electric scooter and the electric bike business, how many of them had degrees in electric bike or scooters? Just to make the point that many of their skills were transferable. So where the people that are populating these new business units are coming from internal, not external. And so this idea of moving laterally, I love that. I think that gives progression a different angle, and it really opens up the door for people development and to excite people about maybe how they can think about their careers. So switching gears just a little bit here to another topic that I'm very interested in. I'm not sure, I'm hoping you guys are too, is HR technology. I follow Josh Bersin, maybe many of you do as well, among others. And we're really intent on tracking what is happening in the HR tech space. We have struggled a lot with our learning ecosystem because we've had to shift. What we thought we had in place is not delivering what it needs to going forward. And so we know that we need better tools, better seamless learning experience, and we need help from our HR technology partners to deliver learning more in the flow of work, for example. So I think there's been a lot of positive chaos. That's the way I present it in the market. And maybe you know this, a lot of acquisitions, new entrants coming in. And it's been a very hot market that way of change. If you've been to trade shows, you've probably seen this. What I think he's sharing here, though, which is interesting, is even though he's projecting HR tech to slow down in this year, and that some companies are cutting back, other companies are still increasing their spend. And And so that's interesting. And as we dive deeper into his study here, many categories are emerging, and some are really what he calls white hot right now. There's many new and popular categories emerging, like for example, employee experience platforms. This isn't just learning experience platforms, but now employee experience. And these are being popularized right now, like by ServiceNow or Microsoft Viva, for examples. This has become a massive high priority product category. And these features, he suggests, will never fully be offered by HCM providers. And so that's interesting. If this indicates that these are new categories that represent needs that organizations have in order to stay relevant for the future. And these categories take investment, a different strategy and focus. So if you look at all the energy going into hybrid work, remote work, more flexible work, employee listening, onboarding, customized or personalized career and development tracks are becoming more and more important. We'll learn in a minute about the shifting expectations of workers. He's suggesting that we need a place to put all of this and manage it as a set of workflows, and that this deep functionality that is required, ERP and HCM vendors he's suggesting will not have the time to do. So we might have to be thinking differently about how to deliver learning and development through technology in these different categories. So it's fascinating to see how these are emerging. Another wrinkle for our space in terms of this study kind of caught my eye is CHRO secession. The rate of internal secession is decreasing. So if we just kind of take a look at that little segment of leaders in our space at the top, this means that organizations are probably not able to prepare their leaders fast enough for internal secession. And so they're having to go outside to bring in these professionals. If there's any good news here, I love this idea that the C-Talent Officer or Head of Talent Management, which maybe many of you are, is now a new contender for the succession to the CHRO role. So this is, I don't know if this is new, but it seems like it's a newer trend. And to me, that's very motivating and has some implications. So I'll talk a little bit about more about those implications in just a minute. Moving on to talent as just another quick topic of research. This just suggests that having the right talent matters. I think we all know that. I don't know if anyone would argue with that. This ability to match the right people in the right roles has a dramatic impact on turnover and will have a positive impact on the business. And I think that's the story here, once again, is if we can see that having the right people, having the right capability in place builds the case for better, lower attrition, lower turnover, that enhances the business. That enhances the business performance. It's very likely to have that ripple effect. And so that's why it's important for us to understand this. What's also interesting is that most of the respondents are saying they don't have the right talent today. So that's an interesting question. Where are you with your talent? Do your senior leaders know if you've got the right people in the right seats, and especially looking forward? And are you seeing improvements in attrition or turnover as a result of your people development efforts? Because that could be a link that we could make more strongly. I talked earlier a bit about employee expectations, a shift. This is huge, I believe. From the things that I've been seeing and reading and connecting with my other HR partners internally and what they're seeing, the number one concern for HR right now is employee well-being. Employees have very different expectations about work, about benefits, about work-life balance and flexibility. They want to understand how they can grow beyond their role. They want to know what skills will help them succeed now and in the future. This is a huge shift in how we think about the role of L&D, I think, in this context. We have to help support these needs in an integrated way than ever before. So, for example, I'm working very closely with our wellness teams than I ever have before. We're actually integrating learning into those streams that typically just provide benefits and resources for financial planning, for physical wellness, as well as community service, et cetera. And so I think this is just really interesting that what our employees expect is changing, and we have to react to that. And that's challenging, especially with this idea of flexibility and more remote work, is how do we ensure that not only we're getting them the skills they need, but is their overall well-being better? And if we're not thinking about well-being, then we need to be. And to me, that's a new area of integration, or newer, I should say, and an opportunity once again to connect to employee engagement and employee experience in a more meaningful way from our function. So this just shows, once again, this diving deeper on this idea of remote work. For example, remote job postings are up like massively. So with this shift in workers' values, it presents challenges for recruiting and retention. Remote work is staggering, and the ability to train and to deliver learning to remote workers, at least for us, it's difficult, it's challenging. And maybe you're experiencing some similar things. And I think we're just barely starting to figure out how to do this, and we're still behind for sure. So there's opportunity, in other words, once again, to meet these new worker expectations. So just to kind of close out this idea around and insights around well-being, I love this slide because it shows that the linkage between L&D and well-being on engagement. So the opportunity to integrate our programs, integrate elements of development like job rotation, sharing, et cetera, mentoring, and connecting to well-being shows that it has a positive effect on engagement. And if we can show engagement as being increased in our companies, that usually means retention is probably more likely, productivity might be higher, and that has a positive business impact. So this kind of takes us down to what companies are doing. We saw at the very beginning that a lot of companies are investing in L&D. The pandemic has not slowed learning and development investment. Now, I think some companies have had to cut back for sure. Maybe some of your budgets have shrunk, and others, maybe it's increased. But generally, 50% more companies have invested more. That is the trend. And so in our case, we have had to increase our budget. And it's also presents a new challenge in a way to make sure that we're spending, those new dollars in effective ways. This enables, I think, more innovation, more creative ways of thinking about delivering learning and development. The expectations are higher now as a result. But if we can, as L&D departments, start to show the positive impact on the business during these difficult times, I think we can emerge as heroes. And maybe some of you have started to make those connections and produce that kind of value. So once again, I think this just shows that we can leverage this information to makes a stronger case for why we need to continue to invest in people development going forward. I love this notion that the ripple effect of the pandemic has made us think differently about learning delivery. And that's what this chart shows. We can be much more creative, I think. And I think, to be honest, it took the pandemic for me and my organization to almost force us to just think differently. In some cases, we were already thinking more progressively, but this just really accelerated everything for us. So for example, we are now taking a persona-based approach to learning strategy. So we're spending times identifying in our company 3 or 4 different personas of groups of people that have different needs, that need to learn differently. They need different technology. We can't use just the same ecosystem as before to deliver. We have to personalize it. And that takes more sophistication. The idea of learning in the flow of work, that's another really strong theme that has come out. I've seen more and more of. It's one of those things that it sounds great. I think intuitively, we nod our head and say, yeah, learning in the flow of work is great, but it's hard to do. And especially if you haven't been learning that way before, it takes a very different strategy and approach and thinking and education of our people to understand what that really means. So that shift is, while it's exciting, it's challenging, but it does create a lot more creativity and innovation for us. And so I love that idea that we can be thinking differently. Peer-to-peer learning, I love that as well. This idea of extending learning from either a course or a classroom to learning from each other. And so we've started to build that into our programs in a way to lengthen the learning and to reinforce it with more application, to make it more sticky, if you will. And I'm sure many of you are doing the same thing. For those of you who haven't explored that, I think that's a wonderful area, is to really leverage that particular delivery modality into your people development programs. So I love that the data is suggesting that we need to be thinking about these new ways of learning. So to kind of wrap up the data portion, these last couple of slides, it's just, once again, I think some of the strongest indicators, in addition to what I've already shared, is there's a lot of data that's articulating why we need to be investing in corporate learning. And I think that exposure to our senior leaders, to business leaders, is becoming greater. And so this massive investment in corporate learning, to me, is a testament to the fact that executives are more aware and that they see the need for investment in corporate learning. So this really shows that that's happening, but we still have room to grow. I think we may not still completely have figured out how to show the value of that investment yet. And I think that's what the future really holds for us. That's the challenge. How can we ensure this greater investment delivers the business value it needs to? Studies are also supporting the case for people development by identifying reasons for investing in learning. I love this spread of across this spectrum that you can see here. Shows the impact of learning in different aspects of the company, not just on skills, but on motivation for employees. We've talked about closing the skills gap, but organizational agility, that's interesting. It allows organization to move faster to the business changes that are happening. Productivity. And then, of course, the positive impact on business goals. And I think that's the strongest case of all. And I think if we can start to map learning more successfully and development to these areas, the business will continue to respond. And therefore, we can, these are just great opportunities where we can connect learning to. This is, I think, an important shift as well. This suggests that we're no longer these traditional training organizations. And I remember in my organization coming into this role 4 years ago, we were much more of a transactional L&D or a training focused reactive organization. Sometimes we thought we were order takers. The business just would tell us what they'd want and then we would deliver it. And sometimes they would even choose the modality and we would just deliver it. I think this is suggesting we need to shift from training organizations to growth. I love that this notion from, once again, from Bersin. I have long believed that L&D was not simply a training organization, but rather a business, that we were more consultants to the business, almost business partners, learning business partners, if you will. And so this notion of growth, of focusing on growth as a function is really exciting to me. I think it's very timely as well. You can see that there's enormous opportunity in all these different areas, but it also shows that we haven't figured it out all the way yet. There's still a lot of room, but that we're poised right now to close these gaps. You can see those percentages across those different really important areas. You can see there's still a lot of room to improve. And once again, that's that opportunity. So learning is not the end goal. It's a vehicle to enable growth. And I think that's where L&D organizations need to refocus and reprioritize efforts. Organizations need to orchestrate the shift from a culture of learning to a culture of growth, because employees want to grow, right? If we go back to that well-being slide, they want to grow outside of their role. But if we can't create those opportunities for growth, employees will find them elsewhere, outside the organization. So this is just, once again, reinforcing that we can tie these investments and development to organizational and business performance. I think the game changer is when L&D can show that learning not only benefits the learner, but the organization as well. The best learning organizations have significantly superior talent and business outcomes, and almost 30 times more likely to be great places to work. That's that blue icon there in this infographic. Building capability in people amplifies their future growth potential, and thus the ripple effect is it increases performance. That aggregate performance then should impact positive business performance. Then it also indicates an organization's ability to outperform other organizations in critical business and talent outcomes, such as financial success, customer sat, innovation, and employee engagement. So that's kind of my water skiing exercise. I thank you for hanging in there with me as we've gone through different aspects of what I've been kind of have found interesting and that I've seen in the industry, and that have started to form my ideas to translate that internally into, therefore what, how do I use this information to and apply it in my organization, and to restructure my talent organization to be more effective and to meet these needs. So once again, I think we have this idea of opportunity or challenge. We know that there's challenges for sure. What's interesting is in this study from Blanchard that these top concerns for L&D leaders are probably maybe some of these you share as well. What's interesting to me is that these are business problems, not necessarily learning ones. But once again, I feel like we are perfectly positioned to deliver solutions to these business priorities. The question is, do we see how we can do that? Have we thought about it that way before, until now? If you haven't been thinking strategically about L&D and connecting them to these critical challenges, then we'll probably stay in the traditional approach of learning and we'll probably stay behind. But I believe that we need to confront these obstacles. It's a very exciting challenge. And once again, I've said it in the beginning, I can't think of a better time than now. The need is so great to really be on top of our L&D game, if you will. So what this all means to me is there's a lot of data. Maybe all of you are interpreting the data that you're seeing and analysis differently. But much depends on our perspective of how we're looking at this. Do we see, can we internalize these insights and make these shifts? For some of us, we see this as a springboard to opportunity. For others, it might be much more about just survival. So wherever you are, I think the opportunity is, do you see this once again as a challenge or a wonderful opportunity? And that's that reflective question that I've been asking myself and my team. So in order to really progress through this, I think we have to have a mindset change. I think we have to think like the business, talk like the business, understand the business like never before. Our business acumen of how our organizations actually work and the different functions. We don't need to be experts in all those functions, but we need to understand enough to make to make better linkages with what we do to business outcomes. I find it interesting. I've been to several different conferences, maybe like many of you over the last 18 months. And I've been hearing this question, L&D has to be at the strategic table, which I agree. One time I even heard a professional say that, we demand to be at the C-level to ensure that our senior leaders hear us. And I find that kind of caught my attention, because the only way that I've ever made it to the strategic table was only by earning my way there. In some ways, I think that L&D is like the fine arts in high school. It's an easy place to cut if it's not producing value. The best way I know is to be more business minded, and instead of being more HR or learning minded. When I first came into HR, as you know, the first part of my career was more in operations and outside of HR. So when I first got to the function and I started interfacing with different people, I was struck. I was really surprised that they often did not have very much business acumen. And that's just my own ignorance of the function coming into it. But I could immediately see why sometimes it was difficult for HR, if you will, to not be very strategic, because they didn't speak the language of the business. And that's not what their focus was. Their focus was HR, or in our case, L&D. And so that's something that I've carried with me all these years, is making sure that my teams and that I'm always keeping myself focused on the business. And so in other words, it doesn't matter if our L&D budgets are really big, but we aren't able to really provide that kind of business value, we don't have the trust of the business, then we'll probably always struggle and be behind. So in my world, if we accept this idea that we need to embrace a new mind shift, then that naturally leads to this idea that we need a new value proposition. And so, what are some ideas of how we can do that? These are just some of mine. So I've always loved the idea that we wanted to create more of a pull with the business than pushing our programs and people development courses and training. But the only way to do that is for them to see that value, right? And that's what pulls them. And so, and we have to distinguish ourselves with even internally with our business. So what I learned from a mentor of mine early in my career, before I was even in HR, was I was in the world, once again, of quality and process improvement. And my boss would take me with him. And as he met with leaders, he never asked process or quality questions. He was always asking business questions. And that stuck with me. And so that's something that I've taken to my teams as well. I learned through trial and error. I thought Six Sigma was the greatest thing on earth, and I would lead with that. But I found out that people didn't really care so much about the methodology. They cared about their business priority because I hadn't made the right link. So I'm suggesting, maybe one way to move forward, if you aren't already doing this, is maybe change the questions that you're asking as a way to make this shift and to start to create more value. I've had great experiences when I've stopped asking the questions on the left-hand side and started asking more questions on the right-hand side. And I've asked my people to do the same as they engage with other teams across the business. I believe that this will get you further than you think. First, you'll earn more trust, more credibility and empathy, and faster roads for influence. So that's the question I have for you today is, what questions are you asking as you sit down with your leaders? Are your people development teams more concerned with the programs, training, attendance, engagement, or the business drivers and the business priorities and business pain points that our leaders have? There's nothing wrong with the questions on the left by any means. They're fine, but maybe they're not the ones that get us deeper into the organization, if you will. And so I think we need to provoke new questions. And when we do ask these questions on the right, it actually helps our leaders think about things that they haven't thought about. Sometimes they think they know what they need, but until you start really digging in, they may not, especially when it comes to skills and learning and development. So I have found a lot of value in being able to do that. We can also apply the same thing to what we measure. When I got to my organization 4 years ago, we were doing a lot of these on the left. There's nothing wrong with those. Once again, I'm not criticizing the fact that we absolutely have to have these. In fact, these are essential leading indicators, but they're not outcomes. And that's one of the things that I've had to help my team over time shift to, is from activity to more outcomes, and business outcomes are the best way. So things like skill proficiency, the idea of engagement, higher engagement scores, higher manager excellence scores, skill-based, certifications, number of mentors or SMEs that are engaged in learning activities. Linking L&D strategy to more of those types of performance outcomes, in some cases even to sales in our sales organization. And so I think this is a little bit different view. And it's taken us about 4 years actually to really develop that mind shift change and to start thinking of that different kind of value proposition. So in other words, if you buy us, what do you get? Do you get more on the left-hand side, or do you get things on the right-hand side? And we're starting to see real stronger partnerships with the business, more trust, as we've been able to make this shift. So those are just some insights from my experience that have kind of worked for us that I thought I would share in terms of this idea of making a new value proposition. Burson is really good at maturity models. And if any of you follow him, you've probably seen these over the years. I like maturity models because it gives me a way of thinking and measuring where we are as an L&D organization. I've used them throughout the years. I really believe this particular model helps describe in detail what this idea of a new value proposition needs to be for our function. You know, ask that question of your teams. I do this regularly with mine. If we were our own company across the street that our current company had to pay for our services, what is it that they would get? What would differentiate us from another vendor that we would be competing with? And what is that value proposition that we present? And I think what Burson is suggesting here is that the higher up on this ladder, this maturity model that we are, the more likely the business will continue to invest and see the value of what we do in our function. And we can be more transformative around the business. And I just think that's a wonderful target to shoot for. And I'm thankful for these models that help us kind of push our thinking. So for me, the ultimate goal is to really, have we as an L&D function impacted the business in a value add way. And the way we do that is through building the capability of our people, doing it in getting the right talent in the right seats at the right time, and then connecting all that to business outcomes. So just in closing, we've covered a lot of areas. I've talked a lot. There's many factors that are impacting our function, like I said, that in ways that I've never seen before. The pace is so fast. The technology is becoming more and more amazing, but the challenges are great. But each of these little boxes represents some of the summary of the data and trends analysis that I've seen over the past few years. I believe we're in this perfect storm. There's some high stakes at play, right? Technology investment, it's expensive. Well-being, that's challenging. The pace of business change is just so rapid. And so there's other social and political, influences happening around us as well that are becoming more inherent in our corporations than ever before, I think. And so finding and retaining great talent and integrating this with business at pace is the ultimate challenge. So the data says that our organizations need our expertise more than ever before. It's my opinion that the challenges might be many, but the opportunity is greater also than ever before. And we can make a significant difference through our efforts to build human capability in ways that we haven't thought of before, that will impact the business performance positively. To me, it's a very exciting times. So I just hope we all take the challenge to seize the day and set a new tone with your team today if you haven't already. So I'll end there. Thank you very much for your time.